Hello, this is Mr. Hayes. First, I'd like to apologize for not being at Parents' Night last night. Unfortunately, I either had neurovirus or the stomach flu. Whatever it was, I was down for the count for the past 3 days, and again, I apologize for not being able to be there. In lieu of not being able to be there, I decided to make a video kind of just going over the class and all the things that you can expect this year from world history. Hello, so this part of the presentation covers the course description, which covers like the content and also what type of skills your kids would be working on. I always like to mention when I am here at Parents' Night that a few years ago Massachusetts changed the world history curriculum from European history to actual world history, and that's great. We get to cover a lot of great topics. Just the thing to look out for is that it can be a lot of information for your kids to learn, and it can also feel like it's kind of bouncing from topic to topic and topic that doesn't always seem to make a lot of narrative sense, at least. But again, it's a lot of great content in there, a lot of interesting stuff. We get to cover things like the Mongols, for example, or the Romans, and so it should be a good year. Just got to make sure I always stay on top of making it manageable and understandable. So this is a part I always breeze through, classroom expectations, like behavior stuff. And your kids have been in school like 9 years now. They should know how to behave in a classroom at this point. And if they don't know how to behave, I usually figure it out for them pretty quickly. So again, if you have any questions about classroom expectations, you can email me. But it's straightforward. Just act like a normal high school student, and you'll be fine. So the big thing for all teachers in modern times is technology in the classroom. As great as computers and cell phones and everything are, it's a huge burden on learning and teaching and everything to do with the classroom. I've gone this year full anti-cell phone, so the kids are going to be required to put their cell phones in a caddy at the start of class. They're not allowed to have their AirPods or headphones in at any point during class. Their Chromebooks are only to be used when I direct them to use them. And I use a web service we have called Securely that allows me to kind of limit their internet use in class while they're in class. Can't do that at home, so don't worry about that. But yeah, I am really cracking down on the technology stuff this year. So you probably know that most of the school runs through Schoology. Schoology is great, where it allows me to organize the class day by day by day, and you as a parent can see what I'm doing day by day by day in class to make sure I'm not doing anything crazy. So any videos we watch or any discussions we have or any assignments we have, it's all there day by day on Schoology. For turning in late work, it's also done on Schoology. I'm pretty forgiving with late work at the CP level as long as I have communication involved. And if it becomes an issue and they have to actually have their grade docked, I just do it, a grade letter per day it's late, which, if it's 100% level work, it would be lowered to a 90 if it's one day. If it's 2 days late, it would be lowered to an 80%. Also for homework, at the CP level, there's very little homework. I've really backed off on this for a number of different reasons. A lot of it comes from research. A lot of homework is done incorrectly by teachers, where they just pile on new content never exposed to the kids, and they have no idea what to do, and they don't have expertise support at home, and so it doesn't turn out well. If I do give homework, it typically should be no more than 10-15 minutes max. It's usually a reading comprehension to get us ready for the content tomorrow. So it shouldn't be anything super complicated, more than like a reading comprehension. And again, if it is taking more than 20 minutes to do, please stop, email me, let me know that things aren't working well, and we'll figure it out when your kid comes to class the next day, and we'll figure out what went wrong. So grades work like this for history classes at Essex Tech. 40% of your kid's grade is weighted on classwork/homework assignments. It's called just assignments. That would be things like, reading comprehension, participation, stuff like that. Then 40% of your kid's grade is based off of assessments, like tests, quizzes, and essays. And then there's a new thing we worked on last year, creating these things called benchmark assessments. It's a pretty simple test that all grade 9 students will take, and it's the same across all classes, and 20% of their grade will be based off of that. It's designed to be the most need-to-know content for each unit that we do the benchmark assessment on. And those are done 4 times a year. So this is where I'll go over the content of the course very briefly. So we start the year with something called dynamic interactions, and it starts with the dawn of Homo sapiens, and we'll even cover some of our cousin species like the Neanderthals or Homo erectus or Homo habilis. We then go to the rise of civilization, the dawn of agriculture, and some of the early important civilizations like Egypt, Greece, Rome, Persia, Assyria, and that's it. So it's a great unit. I'm a huge fan. I actually prefer ancient history over anything else, and so this is right in my wheelhouse for education. The next unit is just called the development and spread of religion, and it really just covers the 5 major religions of the world. It's really hard to understand world history without understanding some basic things about the major world religions. That said, it's always not a favorite topic to cover in a public school. Religion and schools are not always the best of friends, at least in public schools. That said, we do need to cover this stuff, and so I always try to limit it to the basic history and then some of the just basic beliefs. Again, you can't understand what motivates a lot of the actions of the past without understanding some basic components about some of these religions, and that's basically what we cover. Kingdoms and empires is probably the most unwieldy unit that we have all year. It covers all the major kingdoms and empires for about a 1,000-year period of history, and it really is honestly too much. It covers all over the world, so we could be covering the Aztecs, then covering the Mughal Empire, then covering the Ottoman Empire, hopping over to China, then back to the Franks in Europe, and so it's quite a bit. It has a lot of great content. We get to cover the Mongol invasions during that period. Again, some mind-blowing facts that come out of that history, like, for example, 80 million people were possibly killed during the Mongol invasions. Pretty crazy. And so, while we get to cover a lot of stuff, it's also a lot of content. So for this unit, for example, we do not have a test. It's pretty unrealistic for me to expect, the students to remember, 1,000 years of history covering 100 different kingdoms and empires. Is just way too much. So we usually find a project to wrap up that unit. So for philosophy, arts, science, and technology, this covers a lot of important topics in world history. So it covers, for example, the Renaissance, Reformation, the Enlightenment, the Scientific Revolution. All of these are just profoundly impactful on modern history, especially the Scientific Revolution. Humanity takes a huge leap forward about 500 years ago when we discover science, and it really has never been the same since. Prior to the Scientific Revolution, humans lived a pretty consistent lifestyle of traveling with horses and battling with swords and bows and arrows and having walled cities. To post-Scientific Revolution, in 500 years, we're landing on the moon and setting off nuclear bombs. So it's a huge important leap forward that we get to cover in that unit. So this unit is one of my favorite units, Global Exploration, Conquest, and Colonization. It really is about how the Europeans, got on a bunch of pretty dangerous boats and went off and explored and discovered what was out in the world, and then would later go on to colonize and conquer it. This is like the era of like Columbus and Magellan and Da Gama, and some of the greatest, most amazing stories in history are in this unit. Maybe my favorite story in all of world history would have to be Magellan's trip around the world, which we get to cover in pretty good detail during this unit. If you don't know the story of how Magellan took 260 guys around the world, and by the way, he doesn't make it around the world, is one of the most incredible stories of recklessness and bravery and faith that I've ever come across. And again, I can't stress enough how interesting of a story it is, and we get to cover it. Also, obviously, Columbus is a hugely important figure in this unit and a very controversial figure today, and we'll get to cover him as well. So the last unit that we cover is called Philosophies of Government. It's basically just about the rise of the modern nation state. The idea of countries is a fairly new concept in history. The idea of France and Germany and Belgium and America wasn't always the case, and it's basically a story of how we created the modern governments that populate the world today. So that's the presentation. I know it's not as good as being here in person. Again, I apologize for that. My email is on the screen if you want to ask any follow-up questions. I'm always happy to talk with people. We can also set up a Zoom meeting if you really need to see me in person. That said, I look forward to a good year, and I look forward to any questions you might have. And please don't be a stranger, and feel free to contact me whenever. Thank you.